up to 57 because there's a lot going on here. Now, if you remember 1896, they ruled that separate but equal could happen. And as seen by the court steps of the Supreme Court here, Linda Brown and her mother are celebrating that the High Court, Supreme Court, banned segregation in public schools. Now notice that is public schools and not complete society. Now I'll tell you what the kicker of that is, and it's kind of an interesting story. So that basically meant that schools are going to have to be integrated. Now it doesn't tell you when they're going to be integrated. It just says you can't have it, and so that's foreshadowing. Now the lawyer who argued this case is named Thurgood Marshall, and Thurgood Marshall also is the first black Supreme Court justice. So he's the head of the NAACP here, Legal Defense Fund, head attorney at this case, and he later becomes the first black Supreme Court justice. So he's significant for a couple of reasons. Now the kicker. How do we do this? Now, Brown v. Board of Education is a collection of 6 cases put together, and they chose Linda Brown because of the courage that was going to be necessary of their family. Now, in the end, Thurgood Marshall will use an experiment conducted in the 1940s by a couple of people named Dr. Kenneth Clark and his wife, Mammy. And it's called the doll test. And the doll test is what you see going on here. He had 2 dolls on a table, invited the children in to play with whatever dolls they wished, and he stood back and watched them, and then afterwards they were escorted out and they were asked some questions. And the big shocking thing was 63% of the students who went in preferred to play with the white doll. And the really remarkable thing after that is 44% of those actually said that the white doll looked like them. So what do we learn here? We learn that separate but equal has caused an inferiority complex in the children. They do not see themselves as being pretty or handsome or of anything of good note. And so this is the kicker of what ultimately decides separate but equal has to go. Now, as this is going on here, we have a new group, KKK. They are pretty militant. This group is militant as well. However, they do not have a recognizable uniform. They are called the White Citizens Councils, or simply a Citizens Council. And if you can tell, they're about 2 things, states' rights and racial integrity. So they do not believe in integration, and they will fight the integration law down to the very wire. Now, a famous member of the White Citizens Council is George Wallace, and George Wallace will run for president in 1968. He's actually shot, but he comes up tomorrow for what he did. He did an interesting thing with that as far as we're going. Now, in 1955, we have the horrific story of Emmett Till. Emmett Till was a young black boy, came down from Chicago to Mississippi. As the story goes, he whistled at a white woman. He was lynched and beaten and killed. They put his body in the river, more or less, and when they got him back, his mother insisted on an open casket to show them the horrors of what lynching looks like and what this young boy, full of life, kind of looked like now. And so as horrific as it was something that she felt was necessary. Now, also in 1955, we have the spark. The atmosphere is right, and we just need some little spark to push it along. Now, this woman did not want to start something. When she sat down on the bus, she simply said, I was tired. I didn't feel like moving. So yes, that is civil disobedience, and she's arrested. And so Rosa Parks refuses to give up her seat on the bus, violating a Jim Crow law, and she will be arrested. Okay? While in jail, she will meet a woman named Joanne Robinson, who also was there for some protesting. They got together, and they are going to organize, famously, what is called the Montgomery Bus Boycott. Now, a boycott is a very effective form of protest because you hit people where they care the most, in their pocket. And so if the buses aren't running, people aren't making money. They do the bus boycott over Christmas shopping season. And within under a year, I would say, the city of Montgomery's buses are integrated. And there are no more problems there. Now they go back to the board, and they'll come back with something in a second. Now, by 1956, the Brown decision is not being met. So a second Brown happens, and this is called Brown 2. They basically ruled, you can see a second bullet point there, that segregated systems must be dismantled or taken apart with all deliberate speed. Now, the white citizens councils and things of that nature are going to use this to their advantage, because with deliberate speed does not give you a time frame. It doesn't say 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years. It says deliberate speed. And they'll use excuses such as, we need a transitionary period. We're in the process of doing that. We're going to have a turnover so that the kids start anew. And so these excuses kept coming, right? Now, who are issuing these excuses? They're the people who will sign what is called the Southern Manifesto. Now, the Southern Manifesto comes out a little bit after the Brown decision, and this is to say that the states' rights, specifically Southern states, will resist this. Now, Senator Thurmond is a unique little example because he actually has an illegitimate child who is black. She recently came out after his death and said, that was my father, and there's an interesting story there. But the Southern Manifesto says they're going to resist the Brown decision to integrate, and that they are not going to be enforced to do this by the Supreme Court because of states' rights. Okay? This has the potential of blowing up into a mini second Civil War, right? Also in 1956, Joanne Robinson and Rosa Parks decided to integrate the entire city of Montgomery through a new organization called the Montgomery Improvement Association. Now, they themselves are female, and so they realized females are looked down upon in the 50s. We haven't had the sexual revolution yet. And so they decide to pick as their person of choice a Baptist preacher by the name of Martin Luther King Jr. And so this is the first time we really see Dr. King hit the scene in Montgomery, okay? Now, by 1957, these improvement associations have become numerous and popping up in as many as 50 cities. And so Dr. King has an idea where they need to focus on one goal and use everybody to work on those goals. So he creates a new organization he calls the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and it is composed of all the improvement associations. They are headquartered in Atlanta. This was the one here in Memphis, the SCLC. You can see Dr. King. And so what happened here? With the SCLC at the collection, they are going to use mass protest marches is their big thing there. And so anytime we have a march a la Washington, D.C. or Selma or Birmingham, that is the SCLC. If you remember CORE, they like kind of bigger production things, planning, stuff like Freedom Riders, okay? We have now set ourselves up for what's going on here. So briefly, just to kind of wrap our brain around this, the Supreme Court said you must integrate, and they came back and said with all deliberate speed, and the Southern said because of states' rights we're not going to happen. So we have to have an issue, and we have an issue. The NAACP goes and finds 9 students to integrate Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas. They have to be brave because, as you can see, they were yelled at basically everywhere they were going, etc. So these 9 students are going to try to enter Little Rock High School, or Little Rock Central High School in Little Rock, which is right here, under the order of integration. Now, famously, what happens is they are actually denied entry. Okay? So the governor of Arkansas denies them entry. This is still Little Rock 9, okay? He puts the National Guard in the doorway to physically block their entrance. This is a fairly big deal. So the mayor of Little Rock, seeing that maybe a potential fight or something bad could happen out, will write a letter to President Eisenhower in 1957 and say, the governor is disobeying your order. Our town is on edge. We really need you to do something. And so Eisenhower, although he's not a big supporter of civil rights, sees that this could be wildfire and spread through all southern states. So, Eisenhower orders the Army, the 101st Division of the Airborne, to go and integrate, to enforce the Brown decision. So it shows that the federal government will support a ruling in favor of integration if necessary. Okay? Now, who is this man, this governor? His name is Orville Faubus. Orville Faubus is the governor of Arkansas. And the second thing I need you to get about him is this, that he is the first time that a southern state has used the excuse of states' rights against a Supreme Court in almost 100 years. Famously, he's quoted saying, "Nobody will remember Dr. King, but I will be famous as Faubus." And I think he got that juxtaposed or backwards, right? So, as we said, the Army comes in, they force these kids into school. Now, that is not the end of it. There's a lot of little taunting and things like that you can read about these people and what they were enduring, but they were able to get into class. Now, in 1957, the Civil Rights Act is signed, the first of four that you're going to have to know. Civil Rights Act of 1957. This basically was to enforce the Brown decision and to reaffirm federal position when it came to schools as opposed to states. So that is our second day there, all complete. The next day will be 1958 until 1964.